So this is KASNEB CPA CCP foundation level. It's an August 2022 paper, question 7. Identify five principles that a cooperative society has to incorporate in its bylaws for it to be registered as a cooperative society in your country. Now, the bylaws, there are actually 7 bylaws by 7 principles that must be included. And number 1 of these principles is voluntary and open membership. Number 2 is member democratic control, So democratic member control. Number 3 is membership economic participation, member economic participation. Number 4 will have the autonomy and independence, Number 5 will have education, training and information, Number 6, we will have cooperation among cooperatives, and lastly, number 7, we will have the concern for community. So these are the 7 principles. Now, the question only needs 5. Identify 5 principles that a cooperative has to incorporate in its bylaws for it to be registered as a cooperative society in Kenya. Now, it has to clearly state that membership is open and voluntary. You join when you want, you exit when you want. So, simply put, free entry, free exit. You can't force somebody to join a cooperative society. Democratic member control. Unlike companies, here we talk about one man, one vote. So it doesn't matter how much you invest in that cooperative society. Unlike companies it's one share, one vote. So if you have so many shares, here it's one man, actually one head, one vote. So you cannot have 2 votes. Even if you have invested so much in that circle, at the end of the day, you only have 1 vote, just like any other person. So there's a lot of fairness and equality. Member economic participation is about improving, any circle is about improving the living standards of the members, enabling them financially, economically, so that they can be able to, to improve in terms of growth and development economically. Autonomy and independence, no outside force is permitted to make decisions on behalf of a circle. It's the members themselves who have the right to make decisions for their circle. So autonomy and independence comes from the fact that they are the ones who have the full powers to run the circle and not anybody else from outside. Education, training and information. This is for the sake of growth, and awareness. Growth and awareness. Circles put a lot of emphasis on growth through awareness. So this is basically a platform to enable the members to be able to be knowledgeable and to get skills on how they can move to another level. Then cooperation among cooperatives. Circles have a structure all the way from national to regional to, going all the way up to the lowest level. So there are those structures, and circles basically believe in the power of unity. So those structures enable all circles to operate in an umbrella-like structure so that they can help each other. And then concern for community, it's all about me and you. And it's about, uplifting each other. Circles are about uplifting each other. So those are the 7 principles. Just pick any 5 and you'll be good to go. It was a fair question. In relation to the law of contract, state 3 rules governing exclusion clause. State rules governing exclusion clause. Now, number 1, Now, exclusion clauses are clauses that are included in a contract, basically to reduce the liability of the we'll talk of the businessman, or the the premise owner, or the one who is making the contract. So he basically limits his liability to some extent, or in totality. Like mind your head, like park at your own risk. Those are exclusion clauses that will not be responsible to this extent. Those are exclusion clauses. So there are like disclaimer statements that are put in contracts, and so this question is asking, what are the rules governing these exclusion clauses? Number one, let's talk something about the exclusion clauses first. The three types of the three rules of exclusion clauses. Number one, you might limit your liability altogether, limit your liability in totality, or you might limit your liability into the you might limit your liability to a specific sum of money, You might limit your liability to a specific sum of money, or you might limit your liability to certain circumstances. These are the three rules. Either you limit your liability altogether, or you limit your liability to a specific sum of money, or you limit your liability to certain circumstances. If this happens, then I will only be responsible up to this extent. Two important principles that must be met. Number one is that the clause must be properly incorporated. So the clause must be properly incorporated. That means that it must have the signature, it must be written in fully. And then the other thing is that it must sufficiently cover. The clause again must sufficiently cover the liability in question. Must sufficiently cover the liability in question. And then it must be reasonable. So this will come in handy when we talk about the three rules governing exclusion clauses. The clause must be properly incorporated. The clause must sufficiently cover the liability in question, and it must be reasonable. Meanwhile, the clauses might limit your liability altogether. They might limit your liability to a specific sum of money, or they might limit your liability to certain circumstances. So now, what are the answers to this? State three rules governing exclusion clauses. Three rules governing exclusion clauses. We will say that they must be properly incorporated, they must sufficiently cover the liability in question, and they must be reasonable. And then, of course, these are the exclusion clauses. They might limit your liability altogether, they might limit your liability to a specific sum of money, or limit your liability to certain circumstances. Now, let's move to the next question. Explain the Contra proferentem rule. These are Latin term. And it's not really complicated. This is a rule on contract interpretation. It's a rule of contract implementation, and and it simply states that an ambiguous, something that is complex, cannot be easily understood. An ambiguous contract term should be construed against the drafter of the contract. Against the drafter of the contract. Against the drafter of the. So if it's not understood, if it's ambiguous, it cannot make meaning, it will work against the drafter of the contract. That is against the offerer. Against the offerer as opposed to the other party. So that is to say that whoever is drafting the contract should ensure that the contract is very clear. Because if it's ambiguous, if it's not very clear, then is the one who is going to suffer the effect of that ambiguity that we are talking about. So if you are writing any contract, make sure that it's very clear and it passes the point home. Examples here are the laws of, it's very common in the law of insurance. Why? Because in law of insurance, there are so many, there are so many generalized clauses. There are so many generalized clauses, and it has so many general terms, which somebody might not understand. So if you don't understand, if they end up being ambiguous, then in such like cases, it simply means that it is the drafter who will bear the burden of carrying that. Otherwise, it should be something that can be easily understood by anybody. So that is the Contra proferentem rule, that any ambiguous contract term should be construed against the drafter of the contract. That is against the offerer. So you should make sure that when drafting contracts, we try to be understood, to be as clear as possible for ease of understanding. Now, that is 2 marks. That is 3 marks. Yeah. Okay. You just explain and then you give an example. I've given you an example, very common in the law of insurance, where we have a lot of generalized terms. If they don't make meaning, they will be used against the insurance company. Describe 3 types of guarantee. Describe 3 types of guarantee. Now, there are so many types of guarantees. Describe 3 types of guarantees. I have quite a number here. All these are types of guarantees. Warranties are guarantees, validity, personal guarantee, continuing guarantee, specific guarantee, prospective guarantee, retrospective guarantee, warranty bond, bid bond, and this bid bond, warranty bond, these are very common. Absolute performance bonds, letter of credit, bank guarantee, unilateral contract, these are very common in the business world. Even specific guarantee, known as simple guarantee, it's a type used when dealing with a single transaction and therefore single debt. This is also very common. Continuing guarantee, yeah, something it remains continuous. It remains in effect until it is actively revoked by the parties. So I think these ones are self-explanatory. All these are guarantees. Find time, go through them. The question is only asking for 3. Describe 3 types of guarantee. But I've chosen to give you all this. So just go through all this. All these are guarantees, and all of them find use in today's world. So you can pause, get to read all this. Yeah, pause, read all this, and as usual, I wish you success in your exams. Thank you.